The conference room at Morrison & Associates was designed for celebrations, not catastrophes. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown Portland, and the mahogany table was covered with leather-bound contracts ready for signing. My father sat at the head of the table, flanked by my brothers Derek and Nathan, all three of them wearing their most expensive suits for what they thought would be the greatest day of their lives. Across from them sat the buyers from Titan Manufacturing, ready to hand over $42 million for Carter Industries. I sat in the corner chair, where I'd been placed every meeting for the past 10 years, the spot reserved for people who were technically family but not important enough to matter. "Before we proceed with the signatures," said Jennifer Walsh, Titan's head of legal, "our due diligence team needs clarification on the patent registrations." My father waved his hand dismissively. "Our attorney can walk you through anything you need." Walsh's expression didn't change. "Actually, we need to speak with Emily Carter specifically. She's listed as the registered owner of every patent that makes this acquisition valuable." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear traffic from 12 floors below. "My name is Emily Carter, and I'd been waiting 10 years for this exact moment." My father's face went through several shades of confusion before settling on something that looked almost like panic. Derek and Nathan turned in their chairs to stare at me as if I'd suddenly grown a second head. Richard Morrison, our family attorney for over 20 years, was frantically flipping through documents in front of him, his face growing paler with each page. "I'm sorry," my father said, his voice tight with forced confidence, "there must be some mistake. All of Carter Industries' patents are owned by the company. Emily just handles the filing and documentation." Jennifer Walsh pulled out a tablet and began reading from it. "According to the United States Patent and Trademark Office, the following patents are registered to Carter Technology Solutions LLC, with Emily Carter listed as the beneficial owner and inventor." She began listing patent numbers, and with each one, I watched my family's comfortable reality crumble a little more. Patent 10,847,293 Advanced Conveyor Alignment System. Patent 11,203,456 Automated Quality Control Integration. Patent 11,445,789 Precision Welding Array Configuration. She paused and looked up. "Should I continue? We've identified 37 patents total, all registered between 2014 and 2024, all under the same entity." 37? Derek's voice came out as a strangled whisper. He was the vice president of operations, the one who'd spent years telling anyone who would listen how he'd revolutionized our manufacturing processes. Except he hadn't revolutionized anything. I had. "This is impossible," Nathan said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Was that fear? Marcus Chen, Titan's CEO, leaned forward with obvious concern. "Mr. Carter, our acquisition is predicated on obtaining full rights to these manufacturing innovations. They represent approximately 95% of the valuation we've assigned to your company. If there's an ownership issue..." "There's no issue," my father interrupted, his voice rising. "Emily, tell them this is some kind of administrative error. You file paperwork, for God's sake. You don't own patents." I'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my head, but the reality was even more satisfying than I'd imagined. I opened my leather folder, the one they'd all assumed contained basic meeting notes, and pulled out a thick stack of documentation. "Actually, Dad," I said, my voice calm and professional, "I do own the patents. Every single one of them. And it's not an administrative error. It's 10 years of work you never bothered to notice. Let me take you back to where this really began, because the seeds of this moment were planted long before anyone realized what was growing." Growing up as the youngest child and only daughter of Thomas Carter meant learning early that my contributions would always be valued less than my brothers'. My father had built Carter Industries from nothing, starting in 1994 with a small machine shop that specialized in custom manufacturing equipment. By the time I was old enough to understand what the business did, it had grown into a mid-sized operation with 50 employees and annual revenues around $8 million. Derek, 6 years older than me, was groomed from childhood to take over operations. Nathan, 4 years my senior, was trained to handle sales and client relationships. And me? I was the daughter who should probably go to college, find a nice husband, and maybe help with the bookkeeping on weekends if I had time. But I'd always been fascinated by how things worked. While Derek was learning business management and Nathan was practicing his sales pitch, I was in the shop watching our machinists solve problems. I'd ask questions about tolerances and specifications, about why certain configurations worked better than others, about the physics and engineering that made our equipment function. She's a curious one, our head machinist, an older man named Frank Delgado, used to tell my father. Smart, too. Understands this stuff better than most engineers I've worked with. My father would smile indulgently. That's nice, Frank, but Emily's going to college. She doesn't need to understand machine tolerances. I did go to college. I got a degree in mechanical engineering from Portland State University, graduating summa cum laude. My father came to the graduation ceremony but left early to handle a client emergency. Derek had been too busy to attend. Nathan sent a card. When I came back and asked about working at Carter Industries, my father seemed surprised I was interested. Sweetheart, we don't really have engineering positions open right now. But we could use some help with documentation and filing. The archive room is a mess, and you're organized. Would you be interested in that? Documentation and filing. After 4 years of advanced engineering coursework, I was being offered a job organizing paperwork in the basement. I took it, because I had a plan. The basement archive room at Carter Industries was exactly as chaotic as my father had described. 30 years of engineering drawings, patent applications, vendor contracts, and manufacturing specifications were crammed into filing cabinets with no real organizational system. My first 6 months were spent simply categorizing and digitizing everything, creating a searchable database that made it possible to find any document within seconds instead of hours. This is great work, Emily, my father had said when I showed him the new system. See? You're perfect for this kind of thing. Detail-oriented work. What he didn't notice was that while I was organizing 30 years of documentation, I was also studying it. Every patent application Carter Industries had ever filed. Every engineering innovation. Every manufacturing process. And what I discovered was shocking. Carter Industries had exactly 12 patents registered to the company, all filed between 1996 and 2004. Nothing in the past 17 years. Meanwhile, our product line had expanded dramatically, our efficiency had improved by orders of magnitude, and we were selling equipment that incorporated dozens of innovations that had never been properly protected. Dad, I'd said during one of our rare one-on-one meetings, I noticed we haven't filed any new patents since 2004. But we've made significant improvements to our equipment. Shouldn't we be protecting that intellectual property? He'd waved his hand dismissively. Patents are expensive, honey. And most of our innovations are just incremental improvements, nothing groundbreaking. Derek handles the technical side of things. If something's worth patenting, he'll let me know. Derek, who had a business degree and whose technical knowledge consisted of knowing how to read engineering drawings other people had created. Derek, who took credit for every efficiency improvement that came out of our shop floor while never actually understanding how the improvements worked. That's when I realized nobody was protecting the innovations that were actually making Carter Industries valuable. And if nobody else was going to do it, I would. I started small. There was a conveyor alignment system that Frank Delgado and I had developed to solve a persistent quality control issue. The current system required manual adjustments every few hours, costing time and creating inconsistencies. I'd designed a servo-controlled alignment mechanism that made automatic adjustments based on sensor feedback, reducing defects by 40% and saving thousands in labor costs. Derek had presented it to my father as his innovation. I've been working with the team on a new alignment protocol, he'd announced at a quarterly meeting. My father had praised his initiative and given him a bonus. I filed the patent myself. I created an LLC called Carter Technology Solutions, registered it in Delaware, and filed the patent application with myself listed as the inventor. It cost me $8,000 in legal fees, money I'd saved from my modest salary, but when the patent was granted 18 months later, I owned the intellectual property for an innovation that was being used in every conveyor system Carter Industries manufactured. Nobody noticed. The patent filing had crossed my father's desk for a routine signature. He was listed as an officer of the company for administrative purposes, but he'd signed it without reading the details. Why would he read documentation from the filing department? That was Emily's boring paperwork stuff. Over the next 10 years, I repeated this process 36 more times. Every time someone in our shop came up with an innovation, I documented it meticulously. I worked with our machinists and engineers to refine the designs, to understand exactly what made them novel and patentable. Then I filed the patents through Carter Technology Solutions, with myself listed as the inventor or co-inventor. The automated quality control integration that reduced inspection time by 60%? Mine. The precision welding array that improved joint strength by 45%? Mine. The modular assembly platform that cut production time in half? Mine. The thermal management system that extended equipment lifespan by 30%? Mine. Derek and Nathan took credit for all of it. They presented these innovations to my father, to clients, to industry conferences. They built their reputations as manufacturing innovators while I sat in my basement office, filing the patents that proved they'd invented nothing. My father never questioned where these innovations came from. In his mind, Derek was the operations genius who was revolutionizing the company. Nathan was the sales wizard who was landing bigger and bigger contracts. And Emily was the quiet daughter who kept the files organized and didn't cause any trouble. The irony was perfect. They dismissed me as just the filing clerk, while I was literally filing the documents that would eventually destroy them. But I wasn't just filing patents. I was building a case for ownership. Every innovation I patented, I could prove I'd developed. I had engineering notebooks filled with calculations and design iterations. I had emails with machinists discussing implementation details. I had CAD files with my digital signature and timestamp. I had test results and performance data that I'd personally collected. When Derek or Nathan claimed they developed something, they had nothing but their word. No documentation, no calculations, no evidence of actually understanding how the innovations worked. Just confident presentations and my father's willingness to believe his sons were brilliant. The legal structure was airtight. Margaret Howell, the patent attorney I'd hired, had made sure of that. Emily, she'd told me during one of our strategy sessions, what you're doing is completely legal. You're the actual inventor of these innovations, you're filing the patents in your own name, and you're paying for the filings yourself. The fact that your family doesn't realize what's happening isn't fraud, it's their failure to pay attention. By 2024, Carter Technology Solutions owned 37 patents that covered virtually every significant innovation Carter Industries had implemented in the past decade. The company my father thought he owned was actually just licensing technology from me. They just didn't know it yet. And then Titan Manufacturing came calling. The first approach came 6 months ago. Marcus Chen, Titan's CEO, had seen our equipment at an industry trade show and was impressed by our innovations. Titan was a larger company looking to expand their product line, and Carter Industries seemed like a perfect acquisition target. They're offering $42 million, my father had announced at a family dinner, his voice filled with pride and satisfaction. It's more money than I ever dreamed of when I started this company 30 years ago. Derek and Nathan had erupted in celebration. They'd started planning how they'd invest their inheritance, discussing real estate purchases and early retirement plans. I'd sat quietly at the end of the table, doing the math in my head. If my father owned the company outright, $42 million would be split according to his will. Knowing his traditional values, Derek and Nathan would probably get 60% between them, maybe $20 million each. I might get the remaining 40%, about $17 million, if I was lucky. More likely, I'd get some token amount while my brothers got the real money. But my father didn't own the technology. I did. I'd contacted Margaret Howell the next day. They're selling the company. What happens to my patents? Your patents remain yours, she'd explained. Carter Industries has been using your patented technology without a formal licensing agreement. When Titan buys the company, they'll acquire the physical assets, the client contracts, the brand name, but not the intellectual property rights to the actual innovations that make the equipment valuable. So Titan would be buying a company that doesn't own its own technology? Exactly. Their due diligence team will discover this before closing. They'll either demand that the patents be transferred as part of the sale, which you can refuse, or they'll walk away from the deal entirely. I'd smiled. Or they'll want to negotiate directly with me. Or that, Margaret had agreed. Emily, you're in an incredibly powerful position. The question is, what do you want to do with that power? I'd thought about that question for a long time. What did I want? Revenge? Money? Recognition? All of the above, I decided. After 10 years of being invisible, I wanted my family to see exactly what they'd overlooked. And I wanted them to pay for it. The due diligence process took 3 months. Titan's legal team was thorough, examining every aspect of Carter Industries' operations, finances, and intellectual property. I'd watched my family go through the motions of preparation, gathering financial statements and client contracts, never once thinking to verify that they actually owned the technology they were selling. Richard Morrison, our family attorney, had done a preliminary review of our patent portfolio as part of the sale preparation. He'd come to me 2 weeks before closing, his face puzzled. Emily, I'm looking at the patent registrations for our equipment innovations, and there's something odd. They're all registered to a company called Carter Technology Solutions. Do you know anything about that? That's my company, I'd said simply. He'd blinked. Your company? I've been developing and patenting manufacturing innovations for the past 10 years. I own 37 patents that Carter Industries uses in their equipment. Does your father know about this? He signs off on the patent filings. It's all in the documents I send up for approval. Richard had looked at me with new understanding. But he doesn't actually read what he's signing. No, I'd agreed. He doesn't. Emily, he'd said carefully, this is going to be a problem for the sale. Titan is buying Carter Industries because they want those manufacturing innovations. If you own the patents, then they're not buying what they think they're buying, I'd finished. I know. He'd stared at me for a long moment. How long have you been planning this? 10 years, I'd answered honestly. Now, sitting in this conference room watching my family's faces as Jennifer Walsh laid out the patent ownership issue, I felt a calm satisfaction that was even better than I'd imagined. Emily, my father said, his voice strained with barely controlled anger, can you please explain what's going on here? I stood up, gathering my documentation, and walked to the center of the table where everyone could see me clearly. For 10 years, I'd sat in the corner. Not anymore. What's going on, I said calmly, is that Titan Manufacturing has discovered what you should have known for the past decade. Every significant manufacturing innovation that Carter Industries has implemented since 2014 was developed by me and patented in my name. The conveyor systems, the quality control integration, the welding configurations, the assembly platforms, all of it. 37 patents total, representing approximately $40 million of the $42 million valuation Titan assigned to this acquisition. Derek shot to his feet. That's insane. I developed those systems. I've been presenting them at industry conferences for years. You've been presenting my work, I corrected. You've been taking credit for innovations you didn't develop and don't understand. But I have the documentation to prove I'm the actual inventor. Engineering notebooks, CAD files, test results, emails with our machinists. Everything properly dated and witnessed. What do you have, Derek? PowerPoint presentations? His face flushed red, but he had no answer. Nathan found his voice next. This is fraud. You stole company resources to develop these patents. I used no company resources, I replied. I did the engineering work on my own time, using my own equipment. I paid for the patent filings with my own money. And I filed them under my own name, with Dad's signature approving each one. Every patent application crossed his desk for authorization. He signed off on every single one. My father's face had gone pale. But I thought, you were just filing company patents. If you'd read what you were signing, you would have known otherwise. But you never did, because it was just boring paperwork from the filing department, and why would the great Thomas Carter waste time on that? Marcus Chen cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. I think we need to pause the closing proceedings and discuss this situation privately. Ms. Carter, would you be willing to meet with our team separately? I'd be happy to, I said. This meeting is not over. My father shouted, slamming his hand on the table. Emily, this is our family's company. You can't just. I can, I interrupted, and my voice was cold enough to freeze the room. Because I own the intellectual property. Without my patents, Carter Industries is just a machine shop with some outdated equipment and a decent client list. Maybe worth $5 million, maybe less. The innovations are what make it valuable, and the innovations are mine. Jennifer Walsh was making notes on her tablet. Mr. Carter, I think we need to discuss licensing agreements or patent transfers as part of this acquisition. But that's going to require negotiating directly with Ms. Carter, and frankly, it's going to significantly impact the purchase price. How significantly? My father asked, his voice barely audible. Walsh exchanged a glance with Marcus Chen. If we can't obtain rights to use these patents, we'd have to withdraw our offer entirely. If we can negotiate a licensing agreement or purchase the patents separately, we'd need to restructure the deal terms considerably. The room fell silent except for the sound of Portland traffic 12 floors below. I watched my father process what he was hearing, watched the realization dawn that his $42 million retirement fantasy was evaporating before his eyes. Emily, he said, and for the first time in my life, I heard something in his voice that might have been respect. Or fear. What do you want? What did I want? I'd been asking myself that question for months. Now, faced with my family's complete defeat, I knew exactly what I wanted. I want recognition, I said. I want everyone in this room, and everyone in our industry, to know that I developed these innovations. I want my name on the patents, which it already is, and I want the record to reflect that the filing clerk you dismissed for 10 years was actually the engineering genius who made Carter Industries valuable. I pulled out another document from my folder. I want you to sign this acknowledgement, Dad. It states that Emily Carter was the primary inventor and developer of the manufacturing innovations implemented at Carter Industries between 2014 and 2024. It acknowledges that credit was incorrectly attributed to others, and it formally recognizes my contributions to the company's success. My father stared at the document like it was a death warrant. And then, I continued, I want to negotiate directly with Titan Manufacturing for the sale or licensing of my patent portfolio. Whatever deal we reach, the money comes to me. Not to Carter Industries. Not to you or Derek or Nathan. To me. You're taking everything, Nathan said, his voice hollow. No, I corrected. I'm taking what's mine. You're the ones who tried to take credit for work you didn't do. The difference is, I can prove my ownership. Derek slumped back in his chair, his earlier confidence completely shattered. Nathan was staring at the table, apparently unable to process what was happening. My father looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 10 minutes. Marcus Chen broke the silence. Ms. Carter, would you be willing to discuss terms? Titan is still very interested in acquiring these technologies, but obviously we need to negotiate with the actual rights holder. I'm willing to discuss terms, I agreed. But not today. I think my family needs some time to process this situation. Shall we reconvene next week? That would be acceptable, Chen said. He stood, and his team began gathering their materials. Mr. Carter, we'll be in touch once we've had a chance to evaluate our options. As the Titan team filed out of the conference room, I gathered my documents and prepared to leave as well. My father finally found his voice again. Emily, wait. I paused at the door. How long have you been planning this? He asked. Since the day you told me I was perfect for detail-oriented work, I said. Since the day you made it clear that my engineering degree didn't matter because I was just the daughter who should organize filing cabinets. 10 years, Dad. I've been planning this for 10 years. I never meant, he started, but I cut him off. You never meant to dismiss me? You never meant to give Derek and Nathan credit for my work? You never meant to treat me like I was less capable, less intelligent, less valuable than my brothers? I shook my head. Maybe you didn't mean to. But you did it anyway. Every single day for 10 years. I opened the door to leave, then turned back one more time. The sad part is, it didn't have to be this way. If you'd ever asked me about my work, if you'd ever looked at what I was actually doing instead of assuming I was just filing papers, we could have been partners. I would have shared those patents with the company. With you. But you never asked. You never looked. You just assumed that Emily was too simple, too detail-oriented, too much of a woman to do anything important. I left before he could respond, taking the elevator down to street level and walking out into the Portland afternoon. Behind me, my family was left to process the ruins of their $42 million dream. The negotiations with Titan Manufacturing took 3 weeks. Margaret Howell represented me, and she was ruthless in a way that made me proud. Titan wanted my patents badly enough that they were willing to restructure the entire deal. The final terms were elegant in their simplicity. Titan would purchase Carter Industries from my father for $8 million, roughly the value of the physical assets, brand name, and client contracts without the innovative technology. They would purchase my patent portfolio separately for $38 million, with an additional provision that I would serve as a consulting engineer for 2 years at $300,000 annually to help integrate the technologies into their manufacturing processes. My total take: $38 million plus $600,000 in consulting fees. My father's take: $8 million, to be split according to his estate planning wishes. Derek and Nathan would get roughly $2 million each from their father's sale. I would get $38 million for work they'd claimed credit for. The public announcement of the deal included my name prominently. Titan Manufacturing acquires Carter Industries and revolutionary patent portfolio from engineer Emily Carter. The industry trade publications ran features about the unknown engineer, who'd been quietly developing innovations while working in her family's documentation department. I gave several interviews, and in each one, I was honest about what had happened. Not vindictive, just factual. I developed these technologies over 10 years while working at my family's company. I filed the patents in my own name because I was the inventor. My family assumed I was just filing paperwork, but I was actually filing my own inventions. The response from other women in manufacturing and engineering was overwhelming. I received hundreds of emails from women who'd experienced similar dismissal, who'd watched men take credit for their work, who'd been told they were detail-oriented, when they were actually brilliant. "You didn't just patent your inventions," one woman wrote to me. "You patented a strategy for women who are underestimated. Thank you." 6 months after the deal closed, I started a new venture, a patent consulting firm specifically for women engineers and inventors. We help women protect their intellectual property, document their innovations, and ensure they get credit and compensation for their work. Derek eventually found work as an operations consultant, though his reputation never recovered from the revelation that his supposed innovations were actually mine. Nathan went into real estate sales, where his gift for confident presentation found a more appropriate outlet. My father and I have a complicated relationship now. We have dinner once a month, and he's trying to make amends in his way. He'll never fully understand what he did wrong, but he's at least acknowledged that he underestimated me. "I always knew you were smart," he told me recently. "I just didn't realize you were smarter than all of us combined." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was something. The most satisfying moment came a year after the deal closed. I was invited to keynote the National Manufacturing Innovation Conference, the same conference where Derek had presented his innovations for years. I stood on that stage and told my story in detail, showing slides of my engineering notebooks, my patent applications, my documentation. For 10 years, I told an audience of 3,000 manufacturing professionals, I was invisible. I was the filing clerk, the paperwork person, the detail-oriented daughter who wasn't suited for real engineering work. But I was never just filing papers. I was filing patents, 37 of them, and when my family tried to sell the company built on my innovations, they learned the most expensive lesson of their lives. Never underestimate the woman in the basement office. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old, and I'm the owner of a $38 million patent portfolio and the CEO of a consulting firm that's helped 73 women engineers protect their intellectual property in its first year of operation. I spent 10 years being dismissed as just the filing clerk, while I built an empire of innovations my family claimed as their own. They thought they were selling a company for $42 million. Instead, they discovered that the woman they'd dismissed owned everything that made their company valuable. The people who underestimate you aren't giving you permission to fail. They're giving you the freedom to succeed in ways they'll never see coming. And by the time they realize what you've built, you'll already own everything that matters. That's not revenge. That's just intellectual property law. And it's beautiful.